Hey, what's up guys, and welcome to another Reddit Stories video. In this video, we are going to be discussing the most jarring encounters with supposed skinwalkers on the web. Also, please let me know what kind of videos you would like to see in the future. I'd like to branch out from just Reddit stories, so let me know. And with that being said, let's get into story number 1. My encounter with a skinwalker. It was after my Wendigo encounter in 2016 and my dog had died in 2018. I was 18 and told by MEPS that I would be going to an infantry school in Fort Benning, Georgia in 2019. I was told by my parents to walk the family dog. He's an 80-pound purebred chocolate lab named Coco. I decided to go to the same area I usually went as I haven't seen anything different. My roommate was there when I found the first sign of evidence. We traveled to one of the ponds that was on the course and I found a weird set of tracks. It was large bird tracks that then showed it slowly morphed into dog or coyote tracks. I asked my roommate about it and he didn't know. I only had a small amount of data about this, but I matched it up with a skinwalker. The tracks changing in the snow to a different animal was the first sign. And I didn't want to stick around and find a 150-pound coyote. We headed back to my house and we didn't speak of this again. The following day I went out to the same place, but this time I saw something in the distance. It looked human from the start, but as I got closer, I knew what it was. I watched it slowly turn into a wolf. I didn't want to make any sudden movements. The dog was scared shitless and laying helplessly next to me. I waited till it went away, but it didn't. It's like he knew I was there. About 10 minutes passed, and he headed to the wood patch that was across the street. I decided to use the opportunity to run home. I never saw him again. I still go to that patch of woods. I went there in 2019 with my fiance and family dog and saw nothing. It's weird as when I'm there alone, I find things, but when I'm accompanied, I don't. If I had any evidence, I'd say to never travel in the woods or any place that has a ton of trees and places to hide alone. And if you do travel alone, then bring something to defend yourself with. Stay safe. I'm being stalked by a skinwalker. This all happened about 1 month ago, June. At first I thought this was all just a coincidence, but as I said, this has been happening for just over a month. So I don't think it's just a coincidentally series of unfortunate events anymore. If there's anyone out there who's reading this and that is able to tell if it's a skinwalker or something else, please reach out to me and tell me. My 1-year-old rat at the time had died. It was my first pet, so I was obviously gutted. But it was almost at the end of its time, so it was expected. My rat was big, and I mean big, like the size of an adult Chihuahua dog big. As I said, it was my first pet, so I didn't know how that wasn't normal, but that wasn't the only weird thing about it. It made a dog howling noise instead of a rat squeak. I laughed at it at the time, but now I feel dumb for laughing at it and not jumping to conclusions. And sometimes it would just stand there on its back 2 legs, and that is normal, especially because I had a curious rat. One of the many different rat types, but not the way he would do it. He would stand there for hours, just watching and howling time to time. When it died, my mother weirdly insisted on showing me the body, but I really didn't care, so I wasn't that bothered about it. I like going on walks with my friend because we both have the same humor, so we make each other laugh a lot. We walked for a bit, noticed the deer that was following us. We tried to get it to come towards us by saying, "Come here, wisp wisp," and rubbing our thumbs on our index fingers. Surprisingly, it walked right up towards us. We got a picture with it when we were on our way. About 15 minutes later, we saw the same deer galloping like a horse, but the weird thing is, it was on its back 2 legs. We bursted out laughing, and of course, no one would believe us, so we didn't tell anyone and just went on with our lives. 1 week later, I came to where I am now, in a hotel where they do live acts at the pub. Both exit and entrance of the hallway are outdoors, so it would be completely normal for dogs and cats to walk in and out of the seemingly endless hallway. I was just coming out of the pub when I saw a middle-aged, obese woman loudly mumbling, "Waiter, "Waiter, somebody, please help me." She said, "Ma," I was only able to get out half a syllable before I stopped and gasped as her head turned 180 degrees with one crack of her neck, as I quickly ran around the corner. Starfish on the wall and everything once I turned the corner. Her feet dragging along the ground. It was like an invisible entity was dragging her down the hallway. I hid around the corner for about 5 minutes before running to my room, where I went straight to sleep. I woke up that night to animal moaning and scratching at the front door. That was last night, and I'm going hunting for the monstrosities on the 23rd of July, and I can't wait to get that thing on my tail. I will update you all soon. Goodbye, and thanks for listening. My Skinwalker story. Before I begin, I would like to say that this is a very long story. It's been something that's haunted me since I was 6 years old, since my first encounter with it. I have had dreams about this and 2 very specific encounters with the creature. I'm sharing this story so I could possibly find help on what to do or how to get rid of this creature that's been hunting me since I can remember. Just for background, I am a 21-year-old female and still worry about this creature finding me, but I'll get into detail why later. For now, here's my story. I would always go camping with my grandparents, who I call my Gammy and Gampy. At the end of my school years, I would always look forward to it, since I grew up loving the outdoors and the woods. I especially loved camping, loving the idea of having s'mores, taking long hikes, being around the campfire, and of course, the wildlife we would see. Now, I grew up in California, mostly near cities, so the forest was like my true home to me. I always preferred being near trees and dirt rather than buildings and crowded places. Besides, the woods were much quieter and more peaceful. I always felt safe when I was there, like nothing could ever hurt me. But something strange would always happen at the end of the month of May. I would have this reoccurring dream during the last week of my school year. I would be in the woods, walking alone down a dirt trail. The woods were always strangely quiet. I would continue to walk this path until I saw this red fox poke its head from behind a tree. Its eyes were always strangely human-like, but they were yellow and somehow looked like teddy bear eyes. And it would just stare at me. It wouldn't make a sound at all. It would just watch me. Usually in my dream, I would go up and pet it, that making the fox finally make a noise, usually a soft growl. Then I would continue walking and it would follow me. The first time I would have this dream, when I was actually around 5 years old, and it lasted until I was about perhaps 11. Over the years it would be the exact same thing. I would walk in the woods, find this fox, pet it, then continue my hike with it alongside me. But about having this dream, for the 4th time, it would start to walk behind me. That's when I started to feel uneasy about this fox. I could hear it making odd noises, but every time I went back to look, it was just walking like nothing was wrong, even somehow giving me a smile. Sorry to go on about a dream, but I now believe that it was a warning of the creature. Now that the dream is out of the way, I can talk about my first true encounter. I was 6 years old and going on a camping trip with my Gammy and Gampy for about a week. Of course, I was very excited about it, being able to barely keep myself in my school seat for the last day of kindergarten. They had picked me up right as the bell had rung and already had the camping trailer attached to my Gampy's truck. I remember he drove an old red truck that only had 3 seats, me always being in the middle. It took about 2 hours to get there and another good hour to find our usual camping spot. It was deep into the woods and far from other people, as my Gammy wasn't too fond of being around other people while we camped. As they were setting up the camping trailer, I wandered about the campsite, loving to dig in the dirt for bugs. I had sat down on the dirt and started to dig, but I noticed how strangely quiet the woods were. It was never quiet, not even in the dead of night. I thought it was odd, but being only 6, I didn't think too hard about it. As I continued to dig for bugs, however, I thought I heard my Gammy call for me. She would usually call me Sugar Booger, that being a nickname she gave me when I was born. That's when I had heard, but it sounded like she was very far away and somewhat sick. Sugar Booger. I looked up where I heard it come from, that being from the woods, but there was no way she was there, because she was still unloading stuff from the truck. Even at the age of 6, it didn't feel right, so I walked closer to my grandparents and stayed next to them. I soon forgot about my weird encounter, though as we began to have fun, For the rest of that day, we began playing card games, sat next to the campfire as we ate dinner, and stared up into the stars. I always loved seeing the stars, there never being anywhere I lived at. We started to get sleepy around 9 p.m., I believe, and we started to get ready for bed. There were bunk beds that me and my gammy would sleep on, keeping our luggage on the top bunk, and we would sleep on the bottom bunk. Due to my gammy's snoring, he would sleep on the couch of the trailer. I would always sleep next to the trailer window just in case. I couldn't sleep and wanted to look outside. I fell asleep pretty quickly though, that being the last day of school and all. It was pretty exhausting. I remember waking up maybe hours later. It was still pitch black outside. It wasn't weird for me to wake up late in the night, since I always have had sleeping issues. I rolled onto my sides, trying to fall back asleep until I heard, "Sugar Burger." My eyes immediately shot open, as I heard my nickname being spoken, but I knew it wasn't either of my grandparents. They were both asleep and never were known to sleep talk before. I started to feel this horrible feeling in my gut, like whatever I was hearing really wanted to hurt me. Even at the age of 6, I knew this wasn't normal. Then I started to hear tapping at the trailer window. It was soft, but loud enough for me to hear it. Tap, tap, tap. I just sat there, frozen in fear. I was trying to brush it off as tree branches or rain, but I just knew that wasn't it. I could tell that it was really someone or something tapping on the window. Then I decided to be brave and look. Big mistake. I pulled the curtain away to only peek, and all I saw were these large yellow eyes. They seemed glassy, yet not entirely real. They looked like giant teddy bear eyes, but cold and unwelcoming. I remember in that moment, I panicked and quickly closed the curtain back up. I then hid under the blanket, that being the only thing I knew to do when I saw a monster. I could feel tears falling down my face. I had never been so terrified in my life. I just curled up into my gammy's side and clung to her all night long. That damn tapping only getting louder and more persistent throughout the night. I don't remember falling asleep, but somehow I did. I do remember my gammy waking me up around noon, saying how, if I got up quick enough, we could still go fishing. I honestly didn't want to leave the trailer at all, terrified that whatever I saw the night before would be out there. I did eventually go outside, but I was constantly looking around, horrified that whatever saw me last night would get me. My gammy immediately knew I was scared and pulled me into a hug when she saw me, asking what was wrong. I did tell her what I saw and heard, and surprisingly, she believed me. The next thing I knew, she was telling my gampy that we were moving campsites. It took a bit to convince him, but he eventually did and started to pack up and hook the trailer onto his truck. I was put into the truck so I could properly sleep, but I just couldn't. I kept feeling that I was being watched, thinking that every little noise was the thing that I saw, that if I closed my eyes even for a second, it would get me. My gammy wasn't too far from me when I heard it again, but this time, it was my actual name. Aaliyah. In that moment, I had never seen my gammy move so fast. She looked up into the bushes where we heard it, then to me. She got into the truck with me, then pulled me into a tight protective hug. I began to cry all over again, telling her how I just wanted to go back home. That's when my gampy got into the truck as well, and since I was sobbing so hard, to the point I was coughing, he agreed we could go home. We started to head out of the campsite, still hurt that this trip had been ruined by something, but I didn't know what. That's when something in my head told me to look back. I slowly did so, feeling an ice-cold fear wash over me as I saw something. A red fox sitting in the middle of a campsite, sitting there, with large yellow eyes, the same red fox from my dream, somehow curling its lips into an eerie smile. After that encounter, we never did go back to that campsite. We did continue to camp, but in more populated areas. I didn't tell my grandma what I saw, but she had told me to trust my gut. She knew I was sensitive to certain entities, and that would help me if I trusted it. Now, this would be the end of my story, but I'm afraid it isn't. There was one more encounter I had with the creature, and it was much more terrifying than the first time. The second encounter I had was when I was 17, many years later. By this time, I knew very well what a Skinwalker was, and I was still very paranoid every time I went near wooded areas. I was still worried about seeing that fox, but never really thought about it too much. Me and my 2 younger siblings were staying at a relative's house for Christmas, them living way up into a mountain area. I think they were my great aunt and uncle, but I'm not sure. Where they lived, there was no service at all. So unless we hooked up onto their Wi-Fi, we had no phones. I didn't mind the house, still loving the woods no matter what happened. Although at night I hated how they didn't close the window curtains, making it easy to see anything outside to see inside. I did feel safe while living inside the house, knowing that they wouldn't let anything hurt us kids. Luckily, it didn't snow where they lived, so we could go outside and run around. They also had this beautiful black lab, being about a year old, named Pam. She was very playful and normally wouldn't listen to anyone, but my uncle, although she was easily excitable, she was a good puppy. One of the days we were there, my little sister and our aunt went out to the store for a nice girls' day. Although I'm a girl, I wanted to go hiking with my uncle and my little brother. We left pretty early since the hike we were doing was 4 hours of walking into town. It was a really chilly morning, but since we were doing so much walking, it felt great. We also decided to take Pam, it being a good way for her to get exercise and have fun. About maybe an hour into our walk, I started to slow down a bit, wanting to enjoy the beautiful forest. It was so peaceful. I could have honestly stayed there, but as we continued to walk, I started to feel something odd. I noticed how quiet the forest had suddenly become, hearing only our footsteps and my brother talking to our uncle. Pam noticed it too, her ears going straight up and growling softly. I started to pick up my pace to get next to my brother, worried that possibly a coyote or mountain lion was nearby. I knew, though, that they wouldn't be out at this time, though, even if they were not walking in the roads. My little brother was only 9 at that time, and being the oldest sibling, my natural instincts to protect him had kicked in. My uncle noticed the silence as well, telling us to stay close to him and Pam, who was now next to me, and still growling. I began to feel that horrible feeling again, that ice-cold fear I once felt when I was 6. I tried so hard not to think of the creature, but it was all I could worry about. I was scared. I felt like I was back to being that scared little 6-year-old girl again. I had to stop for a moment though, seeing my shoelace came undone. I quickly kneeled down to tie it back up, trying to hurry and just get out of there. That's when I heard it. Aaliyah. In that moment, my heart dropped into my stomach. My eyes widened and I could just feel myself start to shake from fear. It was right next to me. I heard it clear as day. I slowly turned my head and there it was. That same red fox still having those horrid yellow eyes and that same demented smile. Only this time, I saw it much more clearly. Its fur looked so matted and disgusting. The smell it has was like rotten decaying flesh mixed with garbage. Its limbs were much too long for a normal fox, the back legs bending completely the wrong way. Those eyes were still the worst thing about it, but now they looked emptier than I had remembered. I wanted to scream, to run, to cry, but I just couldn't. I was frozen as I was, too scared to even blink. Then I heard it speak again. This time, however, it had mimicked my little brother's voice. Found you. Before anything else could happen, Pam suddenly jumped in front of me and started to bark like mad, snapping and growling so aggressively that it scared me out of my frozen trance. When I looked back, it was gone. I used that moment to run over to my brother and uncle, who didn't see what I saw as they were too far ahead now, but I heard my uncle start to pray and sing along under his breath, keeping my brother and myself close to him. I was just too scared to even look back, so I just kept my eyes on the ground and refused to stop walking. Pam had stopped barking, but she was still loudly growling and never left my side as we continued our hike. My little brother was a bit worried, but he just thought it was a coyote. When we finally made it into town, my uncle had called our aunt and told her to pick us up, saying something about how it wasn't safe for us to walk back. Thankfully, she did come and get us, but she was confused since we talked about that hike for days. On the car ride back, Pam never left me alone. She was right with me the entire time. She knew that thing was after me, and she protected me. I was very grateful that she was with us. Who knows what would have happened if she wasn't. When we got back to the house, I was talked to by my uncle and aunt. When I told them what happened, when I saw, they had started to pray and check that all locks were shut tight. My aunt putting something around the doors. I now believe it was probably ashes, but I never did find out. Unfortunately, this made our Christmas vacation cut short, as they were worried that I was not safe while still in the woods. We had to be taken home the next day, them making an excuse of how there was an emergency with a friend, and that they had to help them out. I felt horrible that this Christmas was ruined, but once I did leave the woods, I truly felt safe again. Before they had tried to drive me back home though, they told me that this wasn't my fault. and luckily that it didn't hurt me or the other kids. It did make me feel a bit better, but it still brought up a lot more questions and worries. It was still around. How? Why? What did it want with me? Does it want my skin? My soul? Was I just going to be tormented by this thing forever? I still don't have answers to these questions, and that's what really scares me. Now, I've long moved from California and now live in Kentucky. I do live in the woods, but so far that the thing hasn't found me. I know that seems very stupid on my part, but life hasn't changed a lot. When I was growing up, I was given no other option to live somewhere else, and my grandpa in Kentucky was kind enough to let me live with him, so please don't call me an idiot for moving into the woods when I had no other choice. Anyways, while I'm happy it hasn't found me, I'm still worried. Can it still find me? Is it still hunting me? I'm not close to anyone who knows truly how to get rid of this thing, and that's why I'm telling my story now, so I can possibly find help. So please, if there's anyone out there who does know, please help me. And that's going to wrap up this video. If you enjoyed, please like, comment, and subscribe, as it is this channel's goal to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.